The suburbs were meant to be a place of quiet perfection, a sanctuary for a new marriage and a fresh start. For Sarah, it had been exactly that for months. Her life with Ethan was a sun-drenched, predictable tableau, a home movie of domestic bliss played on a loop. But deep in her heart, under the soft hum of the dishwasher and the scent of freshly mowed grass, a different kind of story was beginning to stir. It was a story born of a quiet discontent, a restless energy she had no name for until the man next door became a ghost in his own life. Mark Miller's misery wasn't a tragedy to her. It was a siren call, a thrilling crack in the flawless porcelain of her own existence. She had watched him from her window, a silent hunter observing her prey, a man stripped bare by grief, vulnerable and waiting to be touched. The thought of it was a current of pure, carnal electricity that made her perfect life feel like a stifling lie. And she knew, with a certainty, that both thrilled and shamed her, that she was going to cross that line. The suburb of Crestwood was a testament to the American dream, a place where manicured lawns met picket fences, and the biggest drama was usually a misplaced garden gnome. For Sarah and Ethan, it was a fresh start. They had scrimped and saved, trading their cramped city apartment for a charming two-story house with a backyard big enough for a dog someday. The paint was a cheerful cornflower blue, and the front door, a deep crimson, felt like a promise of new beginnings. The air was a clean, sweet blend of mown grass and blooming honeysuckle, a welcome change from the city's exhaust fumes and concrete heat. Sarah, a freelance graphic designer, found her rhythm quickly. Her mornings were a peaceful ballet of strong coffee, a sketchbook, and the soft hum of the dishwasher. She had set up her office in a sunroom at the back of the house, a space flooded with natural light and a view of the garden she was determined to cultivate. Ethan, an accountant, left for the city each morning at precisely 7:15 a.m., his departure marked by the gentle thud of the front door and the distant purr of his car. Their life was an idyll, a perfectly crafted tableau of domestic bliss, a vision they had worked toward for years. The illusion began to crack with the arrival of their new neighbors, the Millers. Mark Miller was a brooding, muscular man with the kind of intense, stormy eyes that seemed to hold a world of unspoken grief. He carried himself with a heavy, deliberate gait, as if every step were a monumental effort. His wife, Jessica, was a whirlwind of nervous energy, her laughter too loud, her conversations too hurried. She had a habit of talking over Mark, her voice filling the silent gaps he left in every interaction. From their first meeting over a shared fence line, Sarah felt an undercurrent of tension. It wasn't the petty squabbles one might expect. It was a deeper, more corrosive kind of friction, a silent war being waged in the quiet stillness of their home. Sarah would see them in their yard, a few feet apart, yet separated by an invisible chasm of resentment. One particularly sweltering Tuesday, a screaming match erupted from the Miller's house, so loud it vibrated through the humid summer air. Sarah, watering her hydrangeas, froze, the rhythmic spray of the hose abruptly stopping. The words were a bitter, furious tangle, too indistinct to make out, but the emotion was clear, pure, unadulterated rage. She saw Mark storm out, his face a mask of fury, and speed off in his truck, the tires spitting gravel. A few minutes later, Jessica emerged, her eyes red and puffy, dragging a suitcase behind her that looked far too large for a short trip. She didn't look back as she hailed a cab and disappeared down the street. The silence that followed was heavy, more unsettling than the shouting. The Miller's house, once a source of tension, was now a tomb of quiet despair. Over the next few days, a quiet desolation settled over the house next door. The lawn went uncut, its once crisp edges becoming ragged. The mail piled up on the front porch, a testament to the life that had been. Mark's presence was a palpable weight. He came and went like a ghost in his own life, his shoulders slumped, his gaze fixed on the asphalt as if it held the answers he was looking for. Sarah would watch him from her sunroom, a silent observer to his private torment. He would sit alone on his porch in the twilight, a single bottle of beer clutched in his hand, a solitary figure against the fading light. It was during these lonely evenings, with Ethan working late, and their house feeling too big and too quiet, that a new feeling began to stir within Sarah. It was a dark, exhilarating hum of curiosity and something more, something carnal. She'd see Mark, a man undone by grief, and a strange, predatory impulse would rise in her. She knew she should feel sympathy, but what she felt was opportunity. A delicious, forbidden chance to step outside her perfect life and into the thrilling chaos of another's. Her mind, once so filled with design layouts and home decor, was now occupied with a new, more dangerous project. Him. It began subtly. She started her evening walks just as Mark was getting home. She would linger by the fence, her gardening shears a flimsy excuse for her presence. Her clothes became less about comfort and more about provocation, a flimsy tank top that showed the curve of her collarbone, shorts that rode a little too high on her thighs. She would bend over to inspect a rosebush, making sure he could see the graceful line of her back, the curve of her spine. It was a silent conversation, a series of calculated movements designed to send a single, clear message. Mark, however, seemed oblivious, lost in his own private torment. But Sarah was patient. She knew that a man in his state, adrift and vulnerable, was a ship waiting for an anchor, and she was more than willing to provide one, even if it meant pulling him under. One afternoon, as she was putting her gardening tools away, she saw Mark sitting on his porch, his head in his hands. He looked so utterly defeated that for a moment, her calculated facade almost broke. A flash of genuine empathy pierced through her, but it was quickly replaced by a wave of desire. This was not a moment for pity, it was a moment for action. The perfect life she had built with Ethan suddenly felt suffocatingly mundane, its predictability, a cage. She wanted a story with a different ending, a narrative that included risk and passion and the breathless fear of getting caught. And the desolate man next door, with his dark eyes and his broken heart, was the perfect co-author. She smiled to herself, a small, knowing smile, and walked toward the fence. The first chapter of their story was about to begin. The humid summer air hung thick and heavy, a perfect shroud for secrets. Days bled into weeks, and Mark remained a desolate figure, a man living in the ruins of his own life. Sarah's small provocations had escalated, evolving from subtle gestures to a calculated campaign. She'd leave her bedroom window open just a crack, the soft music of her Bluetooth speaker drifting across the lawn, a siren's call in the suburban silence. She took up a new hobby, sunbathing in a skimpy bikini in a spot on the lawn clearly visible from Mark's kitchen window. The first few times, she would glance up and see only a dark, empty space. But one afternoon, as she lazily stretched, pretending to adjust her sunglasses, she caught a glimpse of movement, a subtle shift in the shadows. He was watching. The discovery sent a jolt of power through her, a rush that was more potent than any drug. The next day, she decided to abandon all subtlety. She planned her move with the precision of a military strategist. Ethan had an all-day conference, leaving the house to her and her rising desires. She put on a flimsy white sundress, its thin cotton clinging to her curves, and left her hair in loose waves. She decided to bake, but not just any dessert. She chose a lemon pound cake, a simple, wholesome gesture that masked a far more devious intent. The act of baking, something she rarely did, felt like a ritual, a part of her performance. She meticulously measured the flour, zested the lemons, and beat the batter, each step a testament to her single-minded focus. As the scent of citrus and sugar filled her kitchen, a sweet, cloying aroma that contrasted sharply with the bitter undertones of her plan, she waited for Mark to come home. She saw his truck pull into the driveway, the engine cutting off with a mournful sigh. He sat for a moment, head resting on the steering wheel, before slowly getting out. Sarah watched him from her window, a silent spectator to his despair. He was a portrait of a broken man, his shoulders slumped, his posture a question mark. This was her moment. She took the freshly baked cake, still warm, and placed it on a floral plate she had picked out specifically for the occasion. Walking to the front door, she hesitated for a moment, her heart thumping a nervous, excited rhythm. The air outside felt thick with anticipation. She crossed the manicured lawn, the scent of fresh-cut grass mingling with the sweet aroma of the cake. When she reached his porch, she knocked gently on the door, the sound a small tremor in the oppressive stillness. Mark opened the door, his eyes wide and vacant. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His t-shirt was wrinkled, and a faint stubble shadowed his jaw. He was a man undone, a raw nerve exposed to the world. He just stared at her, his face a mixture of confusion and guardedness. "Hi, Mark," she said, her voice soft and sympathetic, a practiced performance. "I just wanted to bring you this. It's a lemon pound cake. I saw you were home, and, well, I thought you might like something homemade." Her smile was a perfect mask of neighborly concern. He stared at the cake, then at her, his expression a mixture of bewilderment and gratitude. "Oh, thank you, Sarah. You really didn't have to." His voice was a low, rusty sound, as if he hadn't used it much lately. "I know," she replied, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. "But sometimes a little kindness goes a long way, and if you ever need to talk, I'm right next door." She let her gaze linger for a moment on his face, a silent invitation, a promise of comfort, and something more. She was offering him an escape, a temporary reprieve from his grief. She knew she was playing a dangerous game, but the thrill of it was intoxicating. The thought of stepping out of her quiet, predictable life and into the exhilarating mess of his was a powerful magnet. As she turned to leave, she felt his eyes on her back, on the soft cotton of her dress, and she knew she had planted the seed. All she had to do now was wait for it to grow. The hook was set, the bait had been taken. Sarah walked back to her house, a slow, deliberate strut. She could feel the success of her gambit like a physical weight. The cake was a mere prop. The real gift she had given him was a lifeline, a flicker of hope in his despair. She went back inside and sat on her couch, waiting. The minutes stretched into an eternity, each one humming with anticipation. She was no longer just a neighbor, she was a possibility. The silence of the house, which had once felt so peaceful, was now a loud drumbeat of her own plotting heart. She was a hunter, and he, in his grief and loneliness, was the perfect prey. The game was on, and she was enjoying every second of the chase. The seed Sarah had planted in the fertile ground of Mark's loneliness began to sprout in a single tentative knock. As twilight painted the sky in shades of bruised purple and deep orange, a sound echoed on her front door. Her heart leaped, a frantic, excited bird trapped in her chest. She took a deep, steadying breath, smoothing down the flimsy sundress before she opened it. The air, thick and still, felt electric with anticipation. It was Mark, standing on her welcome mat, a six-pack of beer clutched in one hand. He looked different from the ghost she had been watching. The light of the porch lamp cast his face in a warm, vulnerable glow. "Hey, Sarah," he said, his voice a low, raspy sound, as if it had been unused for too long. Thanks for the cake. It was really good. I was wondering if you'd, like to join me for a beer on the porch? I just don't want to be alone tonight." The last words were a plea, a raw admission of his desperation. A wave of triumph, sharp and exhilarating, washed over Sarah. This was it. She accepted, her practiced smile of pity melting into one of genuine, mischievous delight. She grabbed a can of seltzer from her fridge, a flimsy shield of propriety, and followed him to his porch. They settled onto his swing, the chain creaking softly under their combined weight, a mournful, rhythmic sound in the quiet evening. The conversation began innocently enough. The relentless heat, the state of the neighborhood lawns, the absurdity of grocery prices. But as the first beers disappeared and the shadows lengthened, the topic shifted, drawn to the magnetic pull of his pain. Mark spoke of his marriage, his voice low and pained, a raw expression of a man who had been holding it all in for far too long. He spoke of Jessica's emotional distance, her constant criticisms, the suffocating feeling of being a failure in his own home. He confessed his fear that he was unlovable, that he had driven her away. He was so consumed by his own misery that he didn't notice Sarah's body language. He didn't notice how she leaned in, her body a soft, warm presence just inches from his. He didn't notice how her hand, which had been resting on the swing, slowly moved to rest beside his, her fingers brushing against his own in a touch that was both accidental and deliberate, a fleeting promise of comfort. He was a drowning man, and she was the life raft he didn't realize was pulling him towards a different, more treacherous kind of danger. "I'm so sorry, Mark," she murmured, her voice a warm, liquid balm, carefully constructed to sound sympathetic. She reached out and placed her hand over his. Her touch was gentle, firm, a stark contrast to the emotional chaos he was enduring. "You didn't deserve that. You deserve to be happy." The words were a lie, a calculated performance, but in that moment, in the deepening gloom, they felt like the most honest thing either of them had ever said. He looked at her then, truly looked at her for the first time since their first meeting. He saw not the neighbor he'd barely acknowledged, but a beautiful, compassionate woman who saw his pain and wasn't afraid to touch it. He saw a refuge, a temporary shelter from the storm. In his eyes, a flicker of something new appeared, a desperate, confused longing that mirrored her own secret desire. He squeezed her hand, his grip tight, as if she were the only thing holding him together in a world that was falling apart. The moment stretched, thick with unspoken need. The air hummed with a tension that was both intoxicating and terrifying. Sarah rose, her movement fluid and purposeful. "Come inside," she whispered, her voice a low, commanding sound. He didn't hesitate. He followed her into the dark, cool interior of his house, a house that had been a tomb of grief just minutes ago. Inside, the living room was silent, save for the rhythmic hum of the refrigerator. The air was heavy, with the lingering scent of stale coffee and a profound sadness. She walked over to him, her movements slow and deliberate, and raised her hand to his cheek. His skin was rough with stubble, but he leaned into her touch, a broken man seeking warmth. He closed his eyes, a soft groan escaping his lips, a sound of surrender. She saw the defeat in his face, the need for human connection eclipsing everything else. He was hers for the taking. She leaned in, her lips meeting his in a tentative, then urgent, kiss. It was a kiss born of loneliness and lust, of despair and calculated desire. He responded with a desperation that was both thrilling and heartbreaking. It was a raw, unfiltered expression of a man starved for affection. The kiss deepened, and their clothes became obstacles, shed in a frantic flurry of hands and murmured promises. On the floor of his living room, surrounded by the ghosts of his past, the first touch was a release, the first taste, a forbidden pleasure. The affair had begun, not with a bang, but with a whisper of consent in the suffocating silence of a broken home. She had sought to fill a void, and in his grief, he had let her. The perfect life she had so carefully crafted was now tarnished, and she knew, with a thrilling certainty, that there was no turning back. The affair settled into a quiet, dangerous rhythm. Their illicit encounters were a dance of opportunity, choreographed around Ethan's work schedule. Sarah found herself becoming an expert in his daily habits. Tuesday was his late meeting, meaning he wouldn't be home until after 8 p.m. Thursday was his weekly business dinner, a predictable window of several hours. Friday was the long, slow drive home in rush hour traffic, a golden hour of freedom. Sarah learned to read the unspoken cues, the subtle shift in Mark's porch light, the text he would send that simply said, "The lawn needs mowing," a signal she now understood meant, "He's gone." Their meetings were always at his house. The empty rooms, still filled with the ghosts of his failed marriage, became their sanctuary. Sarah would slip over the moment Ethan's car was out of sight, a shadow moving between the houses. The key was under a faded terracotta pot by the front door, a secret she now shared with him, a symbol of their forbidden access. Inside, their interactions were a mix of reckless passion and an almost mundane intimacy. They would talk for hours, lying on the worn carpet of his living room, sharing stories and secrets they couldn't tell their spouses. Mark, no longer the sullen ghost, was slowly coming back to life. The vacant look in his eyes had been replaced with a flicker of something new, a mixture of excitement and guilt. He spoke of his dreams, his childhood, his favorite movies, things he had never shared with Jessica. Sarah listened intently, absorbing every detail, becoming the confidant he had always needed. The physical part of their relationship was a frantic, exhilarating release, a way to forget their lives and their lies, if only for an hour. But it was the quiet moments that were the most dangerous. In those moments, a fragile, unspoken bond was forming, a connection that went beyond simple lust. Sarah found herself living a double life, a jarring, exhilarating duality. At night, she would lie in bed next to Ethan, her husband, a man she still loved in her own way. He was kind, dependable, and unsuspecting. He would tell her about his day, his voice a comforting drone in the darkness, and she would nod and hum in all the right places, a hollow performance she had perfected. Her body would be physically present, but her mind would be next door, replaying the day's forbidden encounter, a thrill and a shame coexisting in a messy, exhilarating tangle. The lies became her new currency. "I was at the gym," she would say, her eyes fixed on his. "I went shopping," she would claim, a new dress serving as a flimsy alibi. The lies came easy, a seamless part of her new reality. The guilt, once a sharp thorn, had dulled into a manageable ache. She was addicted to the thrill, to the danger, to the feeling of being wanted in a way that her placid, perfect life could not provide. The predictability of her days had been shattered, and in its place was a chaotic, thrilling uncertainty. One afternoon, as they lay together on his living room floor, a sudden noise from the street outside made them both freeze. Mark's eyes went wide with panic. "Is that your husband?" he whispered, his voice laced with fear. The question hung in the air, a stark reminder of their vulnerability. It wasn't Ethan. It was just a neighbor's car, but the moment of terror, the close call, left an uneasy feeling in its wake. Their secret, once a thrilling game, now felt like a fragile glass pane, one crack away from shattering. They were walking a tightrope, and the fall would be a long, brutal one. The air between them, once so full of passion, was now filled with the unspoken reality of the risk they were taking. The innocence of their affair was gone, replaced by the grim shadow of consequences. The close call had a chilling effect. The thrill of the forbidden began to give way to a creeping paranoia, a constant, low-level hum of anxiety that followed Sarah everywhere. The affair, once a reckless game, now felt like a desperate, frantic race against time. Sarah and Mark became more cautious, their coded text messages more cryptic, their meetings less frequent. They communicated in half-sentences and knowing glances across their lawns. Their passion now, a tense, hurried affair. But the new tension didn't extinguish the fire. It just made it burn hotter, a desperate need to reclaim their secret world, to prove that they could still get away with it. Tom, in his quiet, methodical way, began to notice the subtle shifts in his wife. He was an accountant by trade, and by nature he dealt in facts, in numbers that added up, in ledgers that balanced. His world was orderly, and he had an innate sense for things that were out of place. He noticed the new scent that sometimes lingered on her clothes, a mix of Mark's woodsy cologne and something else, something smoky and primal that wasn't hers. He noticed her phone, which was once left carelessly on the kitchen counter, was now always in her pocket, face down. He noticed the new, vibrant spark in her eyes, a kind of restless energy he hadn't seen in years, a stark contrast to the placid woman he had known. He didn't voice his suspicions. Not yet. He had no proof, only a growing, gnawing unease, a feeling that something in their perfectly balanced ledger was wrong. One rainy Friday, a day Ethan was supposed to be at a late-night work retreat, Sarah received an unexpected text. "Hey honey, traffic's a nightmare. They let us out early. Home in an hour." Her blood ran cold. The phone felt like a block of ice in her hand. Mark was already at her house, having slipped over just minutes ago. They were in her bedroom, a place that was meant to be the heart of her perfect, safe life, and they were in a place where they shouldn't be. "Mark," she whispered, her voice shaking. "Ethan's coming home. We need to go. Now." Mark's eyes went wide with panic. The color drained from his face. The easy confidence he had found in their affair was instantly replaced by raw fear. They scrambled, throwing on their clothes in a panicked rush. Sarah felt a shoe fall off the bed, a stray sock getting caught on a lampshade. This wasn't the slow, sensuous undressing of their lovemaking. It was a frantic, terrifying retreat. "Wait," he said, his voice low and urgent. "The smell. It'll give us away. The air freshener. He always uses it." He ran to the living room and threw open the windows, letting the cool, rainy air rush in, a desperate attempt to air out their shared secret. Sarah ran a frantic hand through her hair, trying to fix the disarray. They worked in a panicked silence, a chaotic ballet of lies and deceit. "I need to go," she said, her voice a little louder than a whisper. "He'll be home soon. Just go. I'll text you later." Mark nodded, his face pale. She kissed him quickly, a kiss of pure, unadulterated fear, and pushed him toward the back door. He slipped through the bushes and back into his own backyard, a silent shadow in the pouring rain. She watched him go, then burst into her own home, her heart pounding a frantic drum against her ribs. She went straight to the kitchen, grabbed a cup, and started a pot of coffee, trying to make her breathing even, to make her hands stop shaking. When Ethan walked in 15 minutes later, she was standing at the counter, a serene expression on her face, the scent of fresh coffee filling the air. "Hey, honey," he said, dropping his briefcase on the floor. "I didn't expect you to be awake." "I was just about to go to bed," she lied, her voice a little too casual. She could see his eyes scanning the room, taking in the open window she'd left ajar, the misplaced throw pillow on the sofa. He didn't say anything, but the look in his eyes was a question she had no answer for. He could feel it, the subtle imbalance in their lives. The cracks were now too wide to ignore, the facade of their perfect life crumbling into a pile of lies. The truth was coming, and it would be a devastating wreck. The tension in the following days was a palpable third presence in the house. Ethan, a man of quiet observation, now watched Sarah with a searching gaze that made her skin crawl. He would ask seemingly innocuous questions. "Did you have a good day?" Or, "Did you see what Mark was up to?" And she would offer a forced smile and a flimsy reply, her every movement a carefully constructed lie. She felt like an actress in a play she could no longer remember the lines to, and the stage was her own home. The easy rhythm of their life was gone, replaced by a suffocating silence punctuated by his watchful eyes. The final straw came a week later, on a mundane Saturday morning. They were cleaning out the garage, a chore they had put off for months. As Ethan was sorting through a box of old holiday decorations, he found a small, black notebook buried at the bottom. He opened it, and a small, delicate note fell out. It was a note from Sarah, written on a piece of stationery with a tiny hummingbird in the corner. "You're an amazing man. Don't ever forget it. S." Ethan's face went white. He knew this was Sarah's handwriting, but he had never seen the stationery before. He walked inside, his body rigid with controlled fury, and placed the note on the kitchen counter. The hummingbird, once a symbol of joy, now looked like a cruel, mocking caricature. "What is this?" he asked, his voice low and dangerous, a sound Sarah had never heard from him before. Sarah's breath hitched. She looked at the note and a wave of nausea washed over her. She had written it for Mark, a small gesture of encouragement after a particularly difficult day. It was meant to be a private moment, a tiny, tangible piece of their secret. She had forgotten all about it. It's just a note for a friend," she stammered, her mind racing for a plausible lie, but her brain felt like a tangled mess. "A friend?" he scoffed, his eyes hardening. "Who is S? Is it from your work? Or is it from your friend from next door?" He knew. The words hung in the air, a devastating accusation. The house, which had once felt like a sanctuary, now felt like a prison. "I don't know what you're talking about, Ethan," she said, a desperate lie on her lips. But her eyes betrayed her. She couldn't look at him, at the raw, agonizing betrayal in his face. The perfect facade she had so painstakingly built was now cracking in front of her. "Don't lie to me," he said, his voice rising in volume, the calm exterior finally shattering. "The other day, I came home early. I smelled something different. And you left the window open. And now I found this. So tell me, Sarah. Tell me the truth. Who is S? Tears welled in her eyes, not of guilt, but of utter despair. The game was over. The perfect life she had so carefully constructed was nothing more than a house of cards, and she was the one who had set it on fire. There was no going back, no way to unring the bell. She broke down, the words tumbling out in a torrent of shame and regret. She confessed it all, the loneliness she had felt, the initial curiosity, the seductive dance, the slow surrender to their forbidden desires. She confessed it all, her words a bitter epitaph to their marriage. Ethan listened in silence, his face a mask of profound sorrow. When she was done, he simply nodded, his eyes filled with a pain that was more devastating than any anger. He didn't scream or rage. He simply walked away, out of the house, and down the street. Sarah stood alone in the kitchen, the hummingbird note on the counter, a cruel reminder of her foolish choice. The suburban dream was dead, replaced by a devastating, hollow reality. The secrets of Crestwood had finally found a way to surface, leaving a trail of broken promises and shattered lives in their wake.